So 8-4. As you can see here, we have a plane and a ship slightly out of era, but close enough. And it says here that ADB is the angle of depression, and that's the one most people will get wrong. Look at it this way. If you were sitting in the plane and you were looking straight away, that's about where you would be looking, right? You would be sitting here and you would be looking that way. And then if you had to look down at the ship, this is how you would look, correct? That right there is the angle of depression. Okay? Because if you were looking straight ahead, then look down, it's the difference between those two is the angle of depression. So the angle of elevation is slightly different. If I was on the ship and looking straight ahead, that's where I would be looking, correct? Angle of elevation means then you look up. Okay, to look up at the plane in this instance. And so that one right down there is the angle of elevation. And that's what it tells you right up here, that DBC is the angle of elevation. Now, if you look at those two, basically I hope you can see that there's a rectangle in the picture as well. All right, and what can you basically tell me about the angle that I marked in blue and the one I marked in green? They better be the same, right? But if you start drawing your angle of depression wrong, you know what some people do is they come over here and say, hey, that right there is the angle of depression. No, it's not. Okay. Again, it's if you're looking straight forward and then look down. It's the difference between the two. And that, again, is the one most people mess up. So maybe make a note of that. Circle this one or something and say that's the one most people mess up. Okay. So then right here, well, we've got angle of depression and angle of elevation is what I would like you to tell me. So let's just do elevation first, because that's normally the one people can get right. So you must be at a lower level. It's the difference between looking straight ahead and then looking up. You get that? And so which one here is the angle of elevation? Yeah, from the kid, basically where the kid is, but there's two angles there. Is it where I just put the red dot or where I put two red dots? Which one? Yeah, one red dot is exactly where it is. And so if we had to name that, we'd have to go, now can I just say angle B? Is that good enough for this one? Unfortunately not, because there's a bunch of angles there. So we could say, what, CBD? Right, because it would go, basically here's where he's looking straight ahead, here's where he's looking up. It's the difference, so it's CBD would be one way, or DBC would be fine. Okay. Well then how about, again, the one most people will make a mistake on is the angle of depression. Okay. Is the angle of depression in the same spot where the kid was? No. The angle of depression here is basically from the window, correct? And it would be the difference from looking straight out and then looking down. And so if you had to, is angle C enough for that one? No, not with this picture. But you could say angle A, C, B. Okay. It's not a very difficult concept, but you can see if you start marking the wrong one, if you start marking that as the angle of depression instead of that one, you're going to get a lot of wrong answers. Okay. Any questions so far? All right. Now here it says to state an equation that would enable you to solve the following problem. Then solve and round your answers to the nearest tenth. Well, let's try and figure out an equation first, then we'll worry about solving it. Well, we do have a right triangle over there. Well, that's important. That means we've got Pythagorean theorem, and we also have SOHCAHTOA. Those are two things we've got. Well, xy is 15. Well, let's put that in there. 15, and xz is 8. They're asking for angle y, though. That's the question. If they asked me for side yz, I would just use Pythagorean theorem, right? And we'd be done. But they want an angle. And what's going to help us with angles? Well, if this is the angle we're referring to, remember the other day we were always picking which angle we wanted to deal with, and remember which one we stayed away from. We stayed away from the right angle. Same thing here. Well, if I'm talking about angle y, what word would describe where the 8 is? Opposite. Okay, so that's opposite. What word would describe where the 15 is? Hypotenuse. So if we're talking opposite and hypotenuse, SOHCAHTOA is telling me to use which of the three trig functions? Sine, exactly. It's the first one there. And so we know that sine of the angle, which is, to the best of our knowledge, y, must equal opposite over hypotenuse, right? Opposite over hypotenuse. Opposite is 8 over hypotenuse of 15. Is that an equation that I just wrote? Yeah, it's got an equal sign. It's got a variable. That is something that we can do. Well, now we have to try and solve that. And so what you're going to want to do is go grab a calculator if you don't have one already. And what's probably the first thing you should do is make sure you're in the correct mode. And which mode do you suppose you're supposed to be in? Degrees. Well, here are your two options. You could sit there and take sine of a bunch of things until it came out to be 8/15. That might take a while, right? You could sit there all day. Sine of 20 degrees. Oh, nope, that's not right. Sine of this. Oh, not right. That would take a long time, right? Well, on the calculator, is there any place that looks kind of like, well, here's our sine right here. Do you notice what's right above that? Sine to the -1. You see that? The nice thing about calculators nowadays is they always put the opposite of it pretty much right above it. So the opposite of sine is sine to the -1. It's called arc sine is what it's technically called. And what that'll do is it'll cancel off sine if I want to. And that's exactly what we're going to do here. If you ever want to cancel off the sine, what you do is basically take sine to the -1 of this side, which means those cancel, leaving me with y. And isn't that what I want to solve for? But if you take sine to the -1 of one side of your equation, you better take sine to the -1 of the other side. So to solve for y, here's basically what you have to type in. Type that in. If you're in degree mode, it will give you your answer in degrees, and it will tell me exactly what angle y has to be. So it's 8 over 15, all right. So sine to the -1, and you have to hit second and that. So, and what was it, 8 over 15? And again, this is where you would usually use those tables. You'd have to find those really small decimals. So we knew that 8/15 was the fraction. Now we're just finding which sine value would actually give me that. And if I hit enter, it tells me, is that the answer you got? What's the one thing I didn't do that I told you to do? Am I in degrees? Am I in degrees now? Does that look a little bit more like what you got? Yeah. And where does it tell us to round in our problem here? Round to the nearest tenth. So if we had to round this, it'd be 32.2 degrees. So believe it or not, you just found exactly what this angle over here has to be. So y is, well, we'll say approximately 32.2 degrees. So you just figured that out. And all you knew was a couple sides. And based on trigonometry, that's what that angle has to be. For that to be 8 and that to be 15. For all of that to work together, that's what it has to be. Okay? Any questions on that? Well, why don't you take a second and try this one right here on your own.